operation around.
Let's get the meeting started. We'll call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is a presentation from the Historic District Committee. It will run from now until, I guess, question and answers will go till 8 o'clock, and we start our regular ARB meeting. So I will now turn it over to whomever is going to make the presentation. I guess Mr. Malone? Or...
I just to do a quick introduction and then turn it over to John. He's our designated presenter.
Okay.
We should use a microphone.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes, I will.
I don't know where the other microphone is, but we just have the one.
This is the recorded
You
publication.
have the one.
I mean, just check. Well, thank you for giving us this time. I know we asked you to meet early to have this discussion. This is really a product of many years of work that you're looking at. This draft, it's the final draft of the Historic District Guide and Recommendations, with an emphasis on recommendations that the Board of Trustees will be reviewing on their Wednesday night meeting. As you already know, in 2014, the Historic District, as it's mapped, was designated a historic district and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And with that designation, there comes no regulation or any preservation protection at all. It's usually the municipalities that can create guidelines, and guidelines is usually the way municipalities go to have some measure of guidance to design professionals, property owners, review boards, as a matter of fact, to have some kind of not even a standard, but some way to inspire people or educate people to keep up the quality of the historic character of the village. And this board is certainly, right in line for reviewing applications. And so this is really intended to be an aid, and it's educational and inspirational. It's hopefully user-friendly, and it is about recommendations. It's not prescriptive. It's not a list of must-do standards, but more like a recommendation and not recommended. And we've got Deb Hargraves here and on your board. She's co-chairing this committee, and we have Connie Kehoe, who is the trustee liaison to our committee, and John Malone will kind of walk us through and the presentation, and when it comes to discussing any of the amendments to the ARB code, then Deb and Connie both can speak about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Connie, do you want to say something?
I think as needed, if you wish.
Yeah, sure.
Try to be an observer here.
Right. I think Earl covered most of it. I think the thing that we wanted to emphasize to the ARB is the fact that it was intended to be non-prescriptive. So unlike other towns, there are municipalities like Nantucket and more urban areas where it's much more prescriptive, where there is something you can do and can't do. And the intent here was to show people, homeowners, what we value about their house, to get that out of the way, sort of set some kind of common ground, like Earl said. There's some sort of baseline that the reviewing boards, the design professionals, and everybody were looking at least at the same baseline. But the goal here, and we've talked about this a lot in the end, was not to take the human review factor, and especially the expertise of the board, out of this, right? So if something in here is on the recommended list, and someone has a reason that they're doing something that's not on the recommended list, the hope is that we get the right answer through people and not just blindly follow what's recommended, not recommended. You know, and that was the thing that I think, you know, could be misinterpreted from this, that it starts to just become a rote. It's meant, it is intended to give you guys some kind of underpinning to positions that you have, so you don't have to make a huge argument as to why you're doing something that is recommended in here or why you think that's the right answer. So that's sort of the baseline, but we didn't want to have it be so strict that you get into this situation where there isn't any human discussion about what's the right answer. Because also one of the things that it's difficult to explain, but the historic district designation is not based on necessarily the value of individual structures, right? The structures here are workmen's housing. It's the collection of structures. It's the district that's been designated. It's the districts that are valuable. So what we're trying to protect is sort of the quality of the district. So, you know, the one specific detail on an individual house might be magnificent and require being protected, but there's other ones where you might see that, oh, this is nice, it's cute, but what they're proposing to do doesn't do damage to the district as a whole, doesn't do a great amount of damage. So that's where we want to rely on the individuals on the board to make those decisions. So what did you guys think of?
How is it intended to be rolled out to other design professionals outside of yourselves that are in Irvington to make sure that they should be referencing this in their design process
Before they get to you.
before they
I
get
think that's
to us?
something we need, that's what we need to
That's
talk about.
actually crucial because it is online and it needs to be positioned somewhere on the village website, because the design professionals, when they do come here, they have to hit the zoning code, right? So they need to at least be hitting that. There has to be in their way that it becomes clear. And, you know, Ed, with certain things like fence code related stuff, he has flyers on the wall in the building, but that doesn't necessarily work, right? Because they're already in there. It has to have the digital presence that's up front that we had talked about.
I can add today that as part of the comprehensive plan group, that the historic district, that group within that reviewed the design guide, including the chair of the group, who happens to also be the chair of the ZBA, that our group was recommending that when you apply for a building permit that you actually pay $5 possibly, or it could be given without charge. But either way, when you apply for a building permit, you get a copy of this. So that Ed is actually required, you know, as part of the form that is filled out, is that either an electronic copy if you don't want the hard copy, but you have to acknowledge either by signing off or by taking the hard copy that you in fact know that it exists and that you agree to some extent to the
That's too late then, because they've already designed their project and turned it in.
Oh, I see.
It has to be like,
I see what you're saying.
it can't, at submission point, everyone will be like, whatever, I'll take my chances with the ARB, and then they get here, and it's just like starting all over again.
Yeah.
Like John said, it has to be broadcast on the town websites. When you're starting a project and you go to it, please, if you're working in the old historic district, you need to reference this guide prior to submission of.
Before you start making it.
Before you start making it.
I thought you were concerned that they were going to come before us and say, oh, I never got it.
No,
I never saw it.
but they
Well,
have
they can do that anyway, but that's why I think, as part of every one of those checklists that Ed has, that there be a line that says, I have read and understand, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
This is Doug McClure, he's a committee member, so speak up.
It's the same issue, though, we have with a lot of things, that there's going to be a section in the ARB code, which I guess we'll discuss, that says this is there to be referred to. If someone isn't reading the code, they're missing a lot of stuff. They miss planning board stuff, they miss all that, so
The other thing
I don't know how much you can actually do.
Just make sure that they're aware of it, I guess is all.
Right.
What about when homeowners are buying a
I was gonna say,
house?
the realtors,
Because we have 3, and of course, we didn't have any guidelines. We just chose to look around town and say, okay, we need to trim our windows this way. But I think that you could really go and put pretty blindly before you ever hit a professional, or when you're doing more minor things that you don't need a professional for. So,
the group also had recommended that we require the realtors in town to also have this. I mean, it sounds minor, but we are going to educate the realtors, and maybe that's a meeting that we could, again,
Right,
make
maybe.
a
Is
presentation.
there a chamber in?
I think that's very
There is.
No, there isn't.
There is.
He left town.
Again?
No chamber
It's over.
again. So maybe it's just an email. Well, there's not that many, you don't need a chamber. We could do
Are all the architects
email and contact information in the building department? Does it have a database?
Oh, can they do a blast
Yeah.
to everybody
Yeah,
who's,
who's ever
yeah.
or
I assume there's emergency contacts or whatever.
That's a good idea. We could just comb the files too, worst case. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not, just to get us a core group.
Yeah, I mean, you could, we have in every building.
Sort of usual
permit,
group
we
of
have to put in our
suspects.
email address, and through the electronic system, actually, through the electronic system, you put an email contact, an info contact into the permit. So they must, maybe if they can get that out, they could do a blast and say,
Would it make sense to do a mailing to the historic district?
yeah. Or, no, actually, you probably could just do it in the monthly, not monthly, the quarterly.
newsletter?
The quarterly
Yeah.
newsletter that goes out, there should be a section in that, probably. You probably wouldn't have to spend more money on that, you could do that,
The town has an email list, right? They have an email blast.
yeah.
yeah, the mayor's message.
Right.
I'd say all of the
Most of the
above.
departments-
Yes,
most of the
want to get it
departments have
out,
their own-
get it out, get it out.
But they have to sign up for that to get.
Yeah.
They haven't got the Salesforce
No,
yet.
that
We haven't got the Salesforce
you
yet.
know, the town.
The village? Salesforce? No.
I think
Uh,
that's some
I've
sort of
heard of it.
It's, I think you do pretty well by it.
Is that like a constant contact kind of
It's a
thing?
CRM, yeah.
Because I think it's only a suggestion, right? Nobody has to really adhere to it.
Well-
So you don't want a homeowner getting their hopes up of doing something like totally different before they've seen it. You know, you'd like them to be aware of it, like.
Right. Yeah, the conversation, the way I started by saying that we want to make sure that, I think if a homeowner comes in thinking that it's prescriptive, I think that's fine, right? If they interpret it as more prescriptive. It's just, I think we had a conversation when we were closing it out that we didn't want a situation, the test is always like, will the Octagon House of 2018 happen with this in place, right? Like you need to have some way that there's some mechanism by which, and everybody knows on the board that you're not too slavish to this, that you have the freedom to make the better decision, right? Because this is not always going to have the best decision indicated.
Well, there's so much diversity too, that, and
Right.
styles that, yeah.
Right, and I think, the other joke is you don't want to make things into a Disneyland, which everyone knows, you don't want to make it,
Williamsburg.
or what, you make it into Seaside, right? It's not Disney.
Anyway, I think it's exceptionally well done.
I was just gonna say, it's really
very well done.
thorough. Looking through it, you just will see, here's great images, here's some samples of work. I'd hope to be like a living document, I assume that's the case,
Yeah.
and that there's regular review of it. I know how hard you guys all worked on this one. to get this
Doug's the
started.
one who's been arguing for the living document, but then when he says, yeah, we can't disband the committee and you have to look at it too, he's like, no way. It's good living, but not with the.
The interesting thing is if this document was
That's
in
a
place,
document.
how would we have been able to deal differently with the Allstate building, that guy's place? Like, how would we have, because we're
That's a good example.
we're dealing with, but there were several issues where this board doesn't have the right to tell somebody they're trying to add on too much to their building. They're trying to create too much bulk based on programs, right? That was the fundamental foundation of the issue surrounding that project. And if you don't have control to affect scale and program as a board, then ultimately we'll find ourselves in the position that we were on that project. Because as much as we said and affected some change, we were essentially rendered powerless at the end of the day.
Well,
It was-
and that's
it was-
exactly right. That's
So,
exactly-
so,
good
what
example.
will this do to
This-
change that
this-
from happening again?
One of the things that you guys do is that every planning board submission that comes in, when it first comes in, it's referred to you. That's one of the 18 million copies that's coming to you. And I know that you guys don't necessarily have the time frame to look at that. But that was put in place in order for you to, the same way that the ECB or the consultants are in a consulting role to the planning board. So the landscape architect, the village's landscape architect writes a memo to the planning board. You know, the village engineer writes about stormwater. The ECB says which stuff they don't want knocked down. And the intent was that ARB says, what's shown here doesn't work, and we'll tell you why. And then that was supposed to drop onto the planning board, so that one of the benefits of that would be the planning board doesn't play ARB, doesn't get into areas where there's overlap, because you don't want redundancy between
Which
the
they
two
did
boards.
in that case. They sent it back to
Right.
us.
And that's why we sent it back to them, and it
Right.
still hasn't come back to us for the final ARB approval.
But we
Right.
So
essentially, I mean, we essentially told them we were gonna pretty much approve what
Well,
came back.
Let's see what comes back.
Yeah.
I think the conversation that may need to happen is between the planning board and your board and say, look, we want to tell you stuff before, we want to, make decisions about mass and scope, or we want to you don't have to act on it, but we want to give you our position the same way that the ECB would give them a position on it. It's ultimately the planning board that may still have the control over that. But you guys, right now, you do have an opportunity to say, in that case, had you reviewed it when it first came in, you could have said, we think this is wrong for the following reasons, or there's no possibility that it will work within the historic district. That, it could have been 2 paragraphs that went right to the beginning, and the process that did happen may be what happens. The planning board may say, okay, we need to refer you to the ARB to get this straight, so before you come back to us, go talk to the ARB.
And that's the
about
one
what
case that it did happen that way.
Yeah, but I think that may be the best course in terms of getting input, and that came up. It's been years now. It came up because the ARB said, look, you're asking us to approve these things. It's too late. Someone
get
has
rubber
done
stamp,
CDs
yeah, right.
for something that's wrong. What are we supposed to do at this point, where you really need to make those comments? And in other municipalities they do it. In Dobbs Ferry, there's a planning board process that one of the first referrals is to the ARB. The ARB puts its thumbprint on it. It comes back to planning board okays
Makes
it.
sense. It's a bizarre process here.
Right.
Everybody's already spent thousands and thousands on drawings and engineering
And time.
and time. It just doesn't.
I think to your point though, Andrew, he was allowed to add that volume by right, correct?
Correct. But in
So-
other historic districts, really everyone, if the mass and scale of the addition is disproportionate to the existing structure, then it could be mandated that you have to make it smaller.
I mean, you speak to that in this document.
We didn't speak to this document, but again, this document shouldn't be read as
Right.
the end all of
Yeah.
what and that's what I mean. I think that would come in the form of a recommendation of the planning board.
Right.
And it's a recommendation that they can choose to act on, or they could put whatever weight they want onto it, but at least you go on record and do it. And right now, what's happening between planning board and zoning board is if, someone at planning board doesn't like something that they see and a variance is requested, they tell the zoning board, like, we don't like this, and the zoning board can
Right.
ignore you or not. But I think there is a mechanism in place. I don't know internally what your process would have to change when you get these big piles of drawings. You'd have to sort of set aside, beyond minutes and beyond review of things in front of you, you'd have to review planning board applications, and someone would have to put together a memo that indicated.
Right,
what
so,
it would
so
be.
you're saying right when somebody makes a submission to the planning board, there would be a staff review by the ARB
Right.
of every application, filling out a certain recommendation that would just be read into in the first meeting.
Right.
That's what would.
Yeah, it would
that's
be in the
what's missing,
preliminary,
yeah.
right.
That's
And
exactly what's
these drawings are
Right.
coming to you already.
Well,
They don't come to us.
There's a copy.
They're single
Occasionally,
copy?
there's a copy in that box when we get it.
Right now, we're supposed to walk in and look at the box?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only, that's the process.
I don't see
Yeah, they
why
don't
it's
come to
not
us.
part, I don't
They
see
don't
why
come
it's
to
not
us.
part of the review that you typically
They
get.
come to us 2 days before we come to the meeting, Friday.
And they're probably scared to do it because it would be
Right now,
ridiculous
there's
in terms
nothing,
of paper.
nothing on the planning board's docket that's in that box.
And that's something's not, because I know right now, planning board, we do 18 copies, and we can account for 13 of them, and 5 of them are supposed to be coming to you.
Yeah, you guys are each supposed to get a copy.
Never get it. We get stuff Friday
We
at
have that in
4
place.
o'clock,
What?
We have that.
before the meeting. Like
It's
just
Right.
Friday at 4 o'clock.
supposed to
This
happen.
always, for me, gets back to the
law.
paper thing, where it's typically like I see it.
No, these applications are uploaded to a Dropbox file and
The thing
everybody
is,
can
the
look
thing
at
is, we get an entirely new house, and we're supposed to, in 3 days, review the entire thing and bless it.
Right.
And we don't have the ability to continue an application. It's
Yeah.
up to the applicant to continue it based on what he's hearing from us.
Right, you can
That's-
offer, you
we
can
can
tell them,
recommend.
you can tell them to, yeah.
That it might not go his way if we
Right.
decide now, and that's our recourse at this point.
That informal might have gone either way, and to Andrew's point, how would you have behaved differently? I think you
We would
already,
have referenced the document and
You
been
al-
like,
you already have it just in your base in what, your responsibilities are in the base code that creates the ARB, you already have that ability to decide about too much dissimilarity, and particularly to protect the historic character of the historic district.
But to be clear, the way that the language in the new code is being written is that there's a separate set of criteria for the district, which doesn't include that language anymore. So the historic district language is now a little bit different, and it says refer to the code, maintain historic character, but it doesn't have some of that other language that was about similar, dissimilar.
Too dissimilar.
You know, it has.
They had to change it because of multifamily,
Right.
multi-use.
So there's sort of, when you hit the ARB code, if you're in the historic district, you bounce this way. If you're not in the historic district, that language stays put. So I think what we were hoping is that, this is meant to be a guide and not prescriptive, and that I was thinking that I think if you guys need to expand your role, the goal was to not make it limited either. Like, I think in certain cases, if you may, because honestly, there are certain things that are more important than other things in the district, right? And that can't be well represented here. Like, all we have is contributing and non-contributing. But of the contributing, there are things that are very important in the district, and there's the churches, and there are houses that are about to fall over on their own that don't have any interesting detail on them. So all of that can't be treated with the same.
When is this intended to be put into action or be something that is usable?
So, do you want me to just comment a little bit on the procedure as I see it?
I mean, you can correct me. I mean, I think we're going to the BOT a work session
On
Wednesday, which is a work session presentation. Then they're going to schedule a public hearing for that. So that would probably be within the month, public hearing, and then they will act on it. What they'll be acting on is, I think they'll be accepting this guideline as a finished product. That this is not law, and then they'll be there'll be the law that will be up for review and acceptance will be for approval will be a change to the ARB law, which references this code.
Right. The public hearing is to deal with the second document you got. Besides the guide, you got a shorter 5-page document, and that's the draft of the legislation that would link this guide to your actual procedure. So it would be in the village code if our board approved it, either what you got or something slightly different. But it simply connects it and says, I mean, that's the part that I'm sure you saw if you look through there, that as John said, in reviewing any application for construction of a new building or the reconstruction, alteration, repair, or expansion of a non-contributing building in the historic overlay district, the applicant and the Board of Architectural Review shall be guided by the Irvington Historic Design Guide and recommendations. So that means that everything that's in there is what you go by, and not only is it what you expect, but it also has a reference to the expense that you can consider as something that is important too. So that's how it becomes a public hearing and enforced.
The public hearing, I don't know, I'm sure there'll be comments about the actual guide, but the public hearing is actually for the law change.
Right.
Now, that having been said, there's two things in here that I think might be an issue. One is
In the law, you mean, in the draft law?
The roofing recommendations.
Right.
You recommended
Oh,
that-
in there, okay.
Yeah, that rooftop solar, low profile integrated solar collectors are recommended. High profile arrays facing the street are not recommended in the district. So if that's going to change from the fairly new legislation.
The solar language is still in there. I
It's,
thought we were going to.
I don't put the new link in.
they're not recommended, the exact language there. What page
Yeah,
is
because
that?
you basically have a solar law that's more aggressive than one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah.
That they
Right.
can't do it.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear.
Yeah, and that's something that should come up. I think,
And then it's referenced, the new
The new-
regulation is actually referenced in there.
right. So that's I think what we're doing is we're being a little gray here. We're kind of like, could you do a little bit better here? But this is the guideline that governs.
The other thing that I saw that is also a conflict is on porches, porticos, and front entrances, not recommended, replacing railings with a different pattern or spacing. We find 118, the 116, they couldn't replicate the railing on the top, on the balcony,
Right.
because the spacing was such that it wasn't
Yeah,
up to code.
Life safety kind of always trumps it, but I think the way the repairs and replacement in kind, you may be able to get away with the way the current code is.
According to the building department, because there were doors going out to that patio,
Right.
it had to be up to current.
You can usually file for state, I mean, in areas where I work, they make you file for a state waiver
Right.
to maintain a non-conforming
What's
condition, to
happened?
preserve the historic integrity.
Right.
And you get sent to the state, and you apply, and they override the building code.
Right.
I don't know if in New York, in Massachusetts and Connecticut, they have that.
New York had that in place, but there were cutbacks that makes it very, very difficult to do that now. So the woman who did our region is not allowed to answer the phone anymore. So there's a little bit of an issue there. But that was the same. You know, that is something to talk about, because every railing here will look wrong if you put it up to 36, like all of these railings.
Well, the height and spacing.
Yeah.
The spacing really was the issue on 116.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that is something, and I think the workaround, like, it almost feels like you should, I don't know, it feels like you should keep it in place in the guideline and maybe put a caveat to life safety, obviously trumps this, but if there's some way locally that we could push to keep those in place, the building department, the building official does have discretion on a certain point. There's also, it would be hard for this to trump life safety, but there is a variance process in this that goes to the Board of Trustees. You know, anything in here, you could tell someone, go to the Board of Trustees and let them tell you, but I don't think that would work with the life safety portion of it.
Do you want to touch on that, though, just how it's different?
Oh, yeah, so other zoning-related codes typically go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for any relief from the code. In this case, it's going directly to the Board of Trustees rather than and the thought is that there may be situations where there's an important historic building or important historic detail that the Board of Trustees could determine it's in the village's interest to move past it. If there's something that's a higher priority than protecting this building, and that would be at the level of the elected official, which is the appropriate level to be making that decision, right? Because if somebody doesn't like that decision, they have recourse, they can put them out of office, and that's one of the reasons that was moved up to that level. The Board of Trustees would have the same, they would be looking at your record, and they would be looking at the same guidelines. So part of their determination would be whether it was, arbitrary and capricious, right? That would be part of it. But they would also have the ability, I think, to relieve it beyond arbitrary and capricious if they wanted to. Which I think that, in a way, having that variance process frees you guys to make the decision that you think is appropriate. And then, if there's some compelling reason to vary it, then they can do it.
Along the lines of the approval process, I don't know whether anybody else saw it, but Bruce Clark said that he sent an email at 7 o'clock about the whole process of ARB to BOT back to ARB, and what happens during those it's something that you'll mull over between now and Wednesday, because Wednesday is really when it.
We talked about it a little bit today with Bruce. The bottom line is if an applicant appeals an ARB decision of an application in the historic district, the Board of Trustees can affirm it, they can deny it, or they can remand it back to the ARB with clarification as to what we're to look at. He just wanted to make sure that there was 3 different avenues to proceed, so that one of them, that he felt strongly about, is that the Board of Trustees could overrule us and not send it back to us, other than to say, you're allowed to do what you want. If the applicant gets what he wants, but he doesn't want it to have to keep going around in a circle.
Yeah.
Which I thought was fair.
That's
That's
fair.
what we always intended.
Yeah, that was the intent, was to give you, if the Board of Trustees really, it's another, if they really think that there's some middle ground that they have to send it back for, but it should just be relief.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
I
It
just
is a
had
beautiful
comment On the
document.
windows,
Thank you.
you pointed out that the divided lights, but you didn't get into as much detail as about the style. The New York window as opposed to a Nantucket window as opposed to a.
Right. Right. I think we're,
I think it would give us something to work with when we have those discussions. As we continue to see when people come in with windows, and when you're sitting here and explaining it to them, they generally are positive, appreciative, but by then they've already bought the windows.
right.
We don't want to take all of that discretion away from you guys.
We just need tools to work with,
Yeah,
right.
And the pictures are great. Those are exactly the type of thing we can use and show to people as we're going through the process.
Right.
Just felt a little.
If you guys want to give us that recommendation, that'd be fine. I mean, part of where we are right now is when Tilly agreed to do this and the price that I negotiated with him, I told him it wouldn't be longer than 30 pages, and so this is where we're at. So we're trying to.
You didn't say whether they were two-sided.
Yeah, right.
Which is still under that.
No, you should.
Well, I think there's some basics that the top and the lower window don't have to match. It's actually something unique to the village. You see it all over the place, and just a few.
Right, but
We're not.
It might be just around windows to put
Right.
a little more meat into the
Yeah,
windows.
because you talk about repair and you get into that. It's
Right.
clear, here's what you do, here's how you take care of it.
Right. Right. I mean, I think there was a sense, Doug, that like each section would have approximately the same, but maybe the windows could be a little bit more robust than the other sections. I think that's.
Yeah, no, it's just when you start talking about different styles of windows, do you then go into different styles of fencing? Do you go into different
we
styles, where does that stop? Because we didn't want to
It's a
this
living
to be
document.
style, right? We wanted to be,
Yeah.
look at the context, understand the district, and make your own judgments.
Okay. Well, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Do you think it'll be a good tool for you? Certainly will. I'm going to get back to the hard copies.
Either one's if you want one.
Oh, do you want to bet?
We- So, you got a hard copy of that there, so I want me to mark up.
I'll see you when.
We're at VFT level, so we gotta support it though, just to make sure if there's, or there'll be naysayers.
Make sure that it's correct.
No, not them, no, I'm thinking others.
Shall not.
No,
Will
yeah.
not.
Right, that's change for. Look at things like.
Okay, let's continue on with the regular part of our Architectural Review Board meeting. Normally, we would go do continuations first and then go on to new matters second, but the fact that the continuation is a new house at Complete House, we will hold that till last and start with the new matters first. First new matter for tonight would be ARB 17-24, 5 Hillside Terrace, O'Reilly.
You guys tell me what I need to do and be able to.
Okay, well, first thing you need to do is tell us your name.
My name is Paul O'Reilly, the owner of 5 Hillside Terrace.
We have exterior relationship.
I think the application is pretty straightforward. Replacing a door and windows with new sliding doors.
French door,
French door.
the other side of the house, which is a new renovation.
I don't believe I had any initial questions. Ellen, won't you?
Seems fine.
Nothing?
Okay, so I'll ask for a motion to approve the application. Second? Second. All in favor?
Great, thank you.
Here you go. Painless, sorry to make you wait.
No problem. Very interesting to hear all.
Do you want this?
Sure. Are there any next steps?
What you do is, tomorrow, the next day, reach out to the building department and he'll have He'll let you know when you can come to the permit.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You want to take that?
Here's two more.
Trees. Yeah, it says trees. Okay, second application tonight is 17-2526 Maple Street, deck.
Hello, Michael Lewis. Basically, at this location, there was a work in progress, and during one of the inspections, it came to light that the existing deck was not recorded and extended well into the setback. I think it extended like 22 feet into the setback or something like that. So we reduced it by almost 6 feet, and it was approved by the zoning board, and now we're before you.
Okay. Has this something to do with the planning board?
I don't think so.
I had only one question. Is the door under the deck new?
No,
So that's an existing door coming out the side?
yes, sir.
All right. I didn't have any issues or questions, anybody? Ladies? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the application?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
I can hold it, Michael, you can have it. You want the site plan as well? Yeah, good thing.
Okay. Next item is item 17, application 17-26, 105 South Buckout Street, landscaping. It's actually a playground, I believe. The applicant here. Okay.
Douglas McClure for the property. Simple application. There's an existing play area in the back of these units, and then there's the paved area behind it. They want to they took out the old equipment. They want to modernize
Is that just staked out right now?
the old fence posts are there, and they've wrapped construction tape around it. They wanted to upgrade their playground equipment. They're putting down sort of an artificial turf surface, and they're expanding a small area towards the back of the building with that surface.
To the east.
To the east, correct. And you guys have to approve playground equipment.
And the existing fence stays as is?
The existing fence stays as is, although it's being expanded around that L piece.
Okay. Is the swing set?
Yes.
Is the drawing to the way the swing set is, it's a single post construction on both sides?
That is the information I was given by the playground designer,
I don't know
yes.
if I've ever seen.
I have not either. It usually has
An A-frame.
an A-frame, but all the technical drawings that they sent, which show the swings actually extended, only show it as a single post.
Something I've never seen, but they're insurance, I guess. Anybody have any other questions? No? Okay, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you. Change the world.
Yeah, final new matter is ARB 17-2758 West Clinton Avenue, fence.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just here if you have any questions. I don't have like fancy drawings like this.
So, Kristen, can you explain where the wall is? I think I understand it, just, it's on top of the existing stone wall?
The fence?
The pergola? There's a there's a fence and a pergola. Ed said we can put them together. So the pergola has 4 posts, 2 of them on an existing stone wall that's within the patio. It's like a plant retainer. And then the other 2 are on the outside of the stone wall and the lawn.
The hard part for us just is if it gets built differently than what we've approved. That's why we're looking for a drawing, that's the hard part.
I do have copies of a better drawing too that I can give you. Yeah.
That's fine.
It's not a lot better. Still, a little better. I like the CAD that we're charging.
So is this going to be a wall pole system?
Say that again.
Is this a wall pole system, the ones that you,
Yes, it is.
okay. And if you could point to, is it this system here? Trying to make it easier, it's shown in D.
Sure.
Is this the one that you selected?
Yes, and I'm sorry, so Ken pointed to this page. So I selected that picture just so that you can get an idea how 2 posts go on a rock wall and the 2 posts can be on the ground. This is like flipped for me because my rock wall is on the interior and the ground posts are, on the outside of the patio.
But other than that, it's the same trellis that's up on top.
Almost identical except for one thing. Mine is, this is this way, and sometimes people do them this way, so the.
Which way are the joists going?
Yeah, actually mine are flipped because this way you see the joists when you enter each side, as opposed to from the yard where just the squirrels are gonna see them. And that's why I brought this additional drawing, just to see that. Like structurally, it's no different, it's just a matter of aesthetics. It'll be more attractive this way.
Right, and the fence itself is going to be green, the pergola white.
Yes, the pergola, yeah, pergola's gonna be that Navajo, Sherman Williams color, and the fence is, I think they call it Verde.
And this is the fence that you're referring to, that style fence, the topper.
The topper's a little bit different than that. There's another picture. The reason that picture is there is so that you can see the back of the fence, which is facing me. The good side is facing the school. Yes, with the scalloped top. And I do have the catalog if there were some other things you want to take a look at.
Anybody, any additional questions? No?
Can you point out to me, because I know your house, this is, Clinton is here? Where's Clinton?
Let's see, there's no trees. West Clinton is out here, so the
Okay,
driveway comes
so the
out.
driveway's coming. Great,
Right,
fine,
that
that's all,
fence is-
yep, on the back. Okay, no other questions?
Okay. If there's no other questions, I will ask for a motion to approve the application.
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I take this stuff back like
You can
those other
take it.
people did? Great, thank you very
Here you go.
much. Thanks for taking the time to look at it. Thanks so much.
They might- Okay. Finally to the continuation, ARB 17-18, 4 Bracebridge Lane, new house.
Hello, my name is Gregory Sharp, architect, representing the Soleimani family. As a continuation of last meeting, the comments, I guess, from the board were that they wanted to see some additional views and that they wanted to see some samples of the material and possibly some details of some of the design items. So,
Before you continue, what we asked, just so you know, was, I have it in the minutes, was material samples and asked for renderings with surrounding houses in them, which we did not get.
yeah.
Okay, continue.
I was, okay. We have the pictures of the surrounding houses. I thought that we had possibly discussed that because the massing and stuff was sort of handled more by the planning committee, that was not required, but.
To give us an architectural aspect of the surrounding properties and the new house is why we asked for it.
Has this already been approved by the planning board?
Yes.
Just so you know, there was several issues with what they call the roadway buffer in the driveway, and they worked all those issues out, which is why the driveway is in the configuration that it is, and the,
So I guess we'll start with the rendering pages. So we're showing the house from a couple of different viewpoints at this time, from the back, from the two back corners, as well as a different view from the front. This view would, like I said, this is the view of the house, but there would be a row of giant arborvitaes basically running right here between our house and the neighbor's house. And there is screening basically on both sides of the property. So, even though this rendering shows it, I don't think you would really ever see this view unless the
the lower
arborvitaes.
right view is the view from Milano's house.
That's right. Basically from the back corner of the Milano's house. But, like I said, there's a giant row of arborvitaes that would be between us.
That are already in place, or you're putting?
No, we're putting it in.
You're
It's
putting
part
it
of the,
in.
yeah.
To kind of match what's already
Yep,
there.
and that's on the approved planning board landscaping plan. So they sort of went around the house, they made us sort of put screening around the house, put more trees in front. Like I said, we lowered the roof line, we, have done a lot of things to sort of, to work with that.
Can I just ask one question?
What?
Compared to the Milano's house?
Yes.
Where does this roof line come in? I think Rick's
It's
point
much,
was.
that's the question. See, it's on the cover, and I'm sorry you have to bring your small glasses.
Oh, okay.
But there is a line, yeah, there is a roof line that shows, and the fact is, our house, I don't think it will be very visible at all. I think the floor line, the first floor line is set about 6 feet below the street level, and the roof line is lower than the Milanos.
The school bus is right in the way of the driveway, by the way.
That's right.
Right behind
I
school
know the
bus.
driveway well, and no, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I didn't think
Yeah.
there would be a lot of impact. I just wondered about roof height.
I mean, from a scale perspective, the Milano's house is a much larger property. So this house is, I think, a lot, closer to the other adjacent house.
He has other details that we may not have.
But the mass on the property is sort of pushed back that way, and we had sort of, just because we're using an existing break in the stone wall, we basically, this is the way that the massing worked out the best. And that's sort of, the bigger elements are sort of close to the Milano's house as well. So it's like the bigger's with the bigger and the smaller's with the smaller house.
So the other thing you'd ask for is the details. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so let me tell you a couple of the details. So, a couple of things. So I did provide a detail sheet. I happen to be doing a project in the city right now that sort of has similar details. So this is an Ipe wood screen. This is some steel, same type of construction, showing.
So what's the back? That was my couple of
This is
questions.
it. So this is basically the actual, this is exactly what it would be. So you can really see what it is. What it is it's a black aluminum behind it, and it's sort of screwed through on this, on AZAC board, because that's, it doesn't get wet, stuff like that. So it's a breathable screen, and the Ipe is super strong, but as you can tell, when you're looking at it, you don't notice you don't notice the black. It just is supposed to look like a little bit of a floating element. It's got some real weight to it, so it's something that, it acts as a nice natural buffer. It helps sort of screen the house. So the concept of the house is to create, with a traditional vernacular stone and wood, but a more modern aesthetic. So obviously these things are supposed to line up. So the way that I have the stone face and the foundation is going to line up with the screen wall. So that's going to create a very nice, clean, modern edge. The way that the integrated gutter and the wall meet is going to create a nice, modern detail. And then I also provided a detail of the back fence, and I provided a detail of my basic window, my basic site-built steel window, which is the thing that I just showed the images of. So
is that the perf metal of the?
Yes, this is the perforated metal of the deck. So this is a perforated Cor-Ten that I use on a lot of projects, and it's really just looks invisible when you put it up. You don't really see it, and I like it better than glass because it's non-glaring. It's sort of the idea is to have sort of more modern but yet a duller sort of aesthetic. So things that are more of a matte finish or natural finish.
And you also brought the metal panel?
I brought the metal panel. So this is a weathered zinc. So
That's the weathered zinc.
that's weathered zinc. It's called weathered zinc. It's called weathered zinc. That's it. This is called weathered zinc. It's not real weathered zinc. I do call out rime zinc on the drawings. And so we are, we're obviously, these are
Budget items.
but
You're gonna break the bank with the eBay siding. so
Yeah.
You'll be going with that.
well, I have a couple of tricks. I have a couple of tricks for things like that. So
And this is
yes, it's included in the siding. So, and like I said, we will get, options, but this is the basic material.
Is the garage door like an airplane hangar door?
No, the garage door is a folding door. So, and I have a detail of that.
Folding door?
Yes, so it folds. So the concept is that it's gonna fold all the way out to there. So it's basically, and I think I showed that on the
this
plan.
panel's not a panel.
That's right. So everything, so it's basically wood panels on the side and a center panel, because I wanted to create a centering sort of architecture, more of a traditional architecture, is to not have the doors go all the way to the side. But obviously with the small garage, you need the doors to go to the side.
So do you get in trouble with the building department if you put a fence or whatever mesh around the AC unit?
On the roof?
Yeah.
I don't think so, no. I think a visual screen is allowed. On this house, you're not gonna see it because Broadway's on the other side.
I'm worried about up the hill and other.
Okay. Yep. We would be more than happy to put a visual screen around it.
Any reason it can go on the ground?
Machines?
Yeah.
Our property's pretty tight, you know, and so we're not really wanting to do that. And,
Can I come back to, I'm sorry, I just want to come back to the garage door. So the outer panels are not fixed panels. Everything swings around?
that is correct. That is.
Because you need the full 20-foot width to get in, 19 foot.
That's right. It's basically supposed to be a full, all these are doors.
All the way around.
All these are, so I don't show the doors open, but that is the concept, is that they basically fold like a,
An
you
accordion.
know, like an accordion door, like a bifold closet door, but just bigger. And,
But the point is, the end one has to be 180, like hinged around.
That's right.
That's what it is.
That's right, that's what it is. So the end is a pivot, right, and then the middle ones are on a track, so
But they can't go 180 unless they disengage from the track. I'm just trying to figure it out because I don't know how that's gonna actually work.
Yeah.
Because you can't bifold doors on a track
Yeah.
and then fold them back around 180
Yeah.
because the pins disengage from
Yeah.
the track.
No, my feeling is it's gonna go right, they're just gonna fold to the end. I'm sorry, I didn't really understand the 180 thing. They're just gonna fold and stack all the way to the end. So the idea
But
is
then
really.
you can't get two cars in and out because you
Well,
have lost so much.
You know, my feeling is that it's, you know, I want them to stack as far as they can. Can you drive two cars down in at the same time? I don't really, you know, I don't know.
Okay. I'm just trying to prevent you
I
don't have to
wish,
come back.
you know, honestly, the code is exactly 400 square feet, right? That's it. It says 400 square feet, so anything.
That's all they give you, right?
That's all they give you. So basically, I would love to have a 450 square foot garage. That'd be great, you know, but that's it. So a lot of it is designed by necessity, I guess, is what it is. Or, you know, so you're sort of prodded to do these things, but, you know, that's it.
I mean, I'll just say my piece. I applaud you for doing a progressive design in a town like this. I think it's like unique and interesting. But I question there's a lot of like pretty aggressive detailing happening that, you know, if not executed well, will actually backfire and make the house not look good.
Yeah.
So I'm questioning some of the, like, there's a lot of different languages happening on the facade of the building,
Mm-hmm.
and that, like, there's appear to be like some alignment things and little things that, you know, it's all the execution of it, because if it's not done well, it's gonna look like somebody, you know, a grouping of cool materials done poorly.
Well, I can give you my personal guarantee. So you know, I've done this on a number of projects. And this is not my first. I don't know. People would say I can't really say it's a spaceship, but, you know, I'd say, you know, it's not my first modern house that I've done. I agree with you. A quote that I do give my clients is that good architecture is the successful collection of good details. So almost all of my work is extremely detail-oriented and quality-oriented, which is why the Solomoni's had hired me and trust me with this project. And so, you know, I am someone who strives to make everything as good as possible. That's, you know, probably why I'm an architect, you know, struggling through the world of architecture versus just, you know, doing an easier job like finance or something, I don't know. But, you know, so I agree with you. So, and the client is committed to doing this correctly. So I think that's the thing. It's like we wouldn't be here. This is a serious venture. You know, he's, you know, putting up the money, investing in it, understands that it's not supposed to look like every other house. It is a unique venture, and that's its benefit. And so we are committed to doing it right. And if we didn't do it right, it would be a terrible idea.
Great, I
Do you
take
have any
your
other
personal
projects? Do
guarantee.
you have any other projects in the area?
Yes.
You do, where?
I did a house in Dobbs Ferry, I just completed. 68 Colonial, if you've been by it, but.
I just have a couple other, just, like, questions. There's a lot of different heights of these secondary masses
Yeah.
that I question why there isn't more consistency brought to them.
Yeah.
Why this gasket is different than that piece is.
We've had a terrible time with this property is on a slope.
I get that.
So we've had, literally, this house is pinned between all these points. So I would love to do that, but the fact is we have to raise up the back of the house, right? Because it's.
I'm not questioning the height of the back, it's more these secondary.
No, that's what I'm saying. So we basically had to line it up or do that, we had to lower the garage height. So we're basically, that's what I'm saying. So one's going this way, one's going this way, and we've sort of like balanced them out versus like have the garage sticking another, right? Because that's basically what it would be. The garage would be up. Because we do have room to raise the garage. In theory, we could raise the garage up to 35 feet, which would look terrible. So we're sort of pinned between the aesthetics of the slope. We're sort of pinned through that. And as I said before, the original design did call for a steeper gable, and that was also something that just couldn't happen with the pitch of the land.
It's this back gasket piece, whatever it is that has the triangular skylight on it. That height is breaking the height from this one and that one, and it looks weird here. It looks weird here. I don't know why that's not in line with that.
I would recommend looking maybe
It's
more
like
at
6
the-
inches up.
I would maybe look more at the 3D, because it's hard, because you're looking at.
I always find that you can always make things look good in 3D. They need to look in flat elevation to really do work.
Yeah. There are certainly areas that will be massaged out in the construction process. With a house like this, it's going to have because of some of the spaces involved, it's going to have a partial steel frame, partial wood frame by the time we're done with, mechanical shafts and plumbing and all the systems that have to go into it. I mean, that there's going to be some push and pull on some of these items just to, make sure all the flashing and the roofing works out right. Like there may have to be parapets. If there's something that you feel is so like that really I have to address, I'd be more than happy to look at it or work with it. Like I think you talked about before, it is a process when you do a house like this, because there's decisions that need to be made as you go through the process, and so those decisions will resolve the thing. So
Yeah.
And then my only other comment, and I'll stop, is that these elements, these glass and metal elements, I think are, they're interesting, but this one smashes into the corner, which contradicts the language that you're doing with everywhere else.
Yeah. That's a bar below and a tub above. So it has to, once again, it has to do with, that's the back side of the house. Like I said, I would love it if I could get my way on everything, but sometimes you lose some of these things, but like I said, there's going to be besides a giant row of arborvitaes, but this is going to be beautiful for this bathtub and this, coming out here. So, the bed doesn't have any windows behind it, so you get like a kind of a blank wall, and then you get this element, then you get, so it's.
I'm going to go back to show the 3D roof. You will see that because of the location of the house relative to, what's the property across Broadway?
You're not going to see that. I'd say
No.
that showing.
Just remember, up here is where you have a quick rise.
You can't see over that because the ridge there is back.
No. Go to your diagram.
There's also like a 60-foot tree right in the middle of it too.
Yeah, this is where it's sitting.
Right here, right there.
So if you go to this, so you're up on the property.
Yeah.
You're going to be. We all spend a lot of time on that property.
Yeah.
Looking at the one across Broadway where they will do the long-term. Yeah. There's people that are going to be looking down on this. So if we could make a recommendation to screen that unit.
Sure. absolutely.
The air, yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Or put it on the ground.
Yeah, screening is no problem. Are there any other questions or anything that I could answer?
I think it's a fascinating project. Good luck.
Thank you.
It's well cited. If it's not going in the woods or second.
It's a London fog. It's like a grayish, it's like a gray. It looks a little close to, it looks,
It's not that great.
you know what, it's really more like, it'll be more in line with this, so it'll be sort of like a,
And are you, I know you're putting up a row arborvitae across the whole
Yeah.
property. So
That's it. The whole thing is very screened. It's, you know, it's
No, I'm not trying to hide it. I just think that wall was a blank wall
yeah,
and could have been something that grows on it.
yeah. There's a a very big black walnut tree that is protected that we're gonna, that's right, that is really like, that's another driving factor of the layout was like we had to keep these trees, so we had, that's a prominent tree.
Ladies?
I'm just curious, there's no window or door schedule, correct? So are they,
Yes.
because they're all custom windows?
Well, most of them, all the ones that are glass and steel, like the ones that the special ones are all made custom, that's right. But the other ones like are just, they're like a La Cantina slider, so they would be bought, so, or folding doors. But none of those are really in the front, all those are in the back of the house, so.
And are there awning windows or the big windows,
They're-
all the divided glass?
Yeah.
Do you have some awnings? I mean, it looks like you have a.
Most of the steel windows are fixed, so most of the steel ones are fixed. It's the ones that are operable are gonna be a La Cantina or a Schuco system. So something of a energy system.
Okay, any other questions?
Lighting was my only other question, in terms of lighting in the front of the house or side of the house. How do you illuminate? it
Entrance
all?
doors, garage doors, lighting?
Yeah. Currently, we do not have that indicated on the plan. There were some outdoor lights on the original, I guess there was an original proposal done by the Milanos, and it showed outdoor lighting, and they made us take it off.
Who made you take it off?
I think the planning board made us take it off. So I just didn't put it on. But I think, realistically, we would like a way to, just safety-wise, have a couple of lights on the house. That would be great.
Well, I mean, the front door should have to have a light.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know why they would tell you to take it off.
yeah. No, they didn't tell me to take a front door light off. They were telling me landscape. There were some lights around, like on the walnut tree. There were some lights on the trees, on the landscaping. And so we were, just listening to the comments, we were under the impression that they didn't really want any exterior lighting. I'm not sure what the protocol is on that, or what would be the preferred.
Well, you have a patio in the back that also has a door
Yes,
going out to it.
that's right.
Should be lighted as well.
Yep.
Problem is, we're to approve and sign off on the lighting, am I correct?
Well, it's part of the, it's
Application?
part of our review.
Yeah,
Well, we're not reviewing it at the moment.
yeah. I can, I could certainly add lighting or whatever other elements. I'm also, like I said, I don't know the full process and how it is. Obviously, we have a long road to go since it is a ground-up house. We have to,
with the lighting.
yeah, we could maybe come back and visit some of these issues. I'm sure there's going to be things I want to come back and talk to you guys about. I think that it's fair for a project like this, that we may talk again. So. And gladly, I'm when I do projects, I want you guys to, be a part of it, and the same with the town, the building department.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like we're gonna have to have an amended application to approve. Recommended, with a recommendation of screening on the air conditioning units on the roof, and pending the approval of lighting fixtures.
Yeah.
so.
Or how about an exterior lighting plan?
Yep.
Because that's really what it is. You want to look at all the lighting outside.
Yep.
And there'll probably be some other items at that point, but that would be great if we can start digging.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the application as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You can take these back.
Thank you so much.
That's all we have, ladies and gentlemen. Anything, any other issues? Come up? Huh? Ladies, anything you want to discuss? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.